Hi, and welcome to the Route to CISO podcast. It's me, Chris Rides. I'm going to be your host, and I'm going to be chatting to seasoned Chief Information Security Officers about their career journeys. We're going to be unencrypting their real-life stories and searching for the hidden keys to help you fast-track your cybersecurity career. Season 2 of the Route to CISO podcast. I'm talking to Kristina Belnap, and this is part 2 of our episode. And where we left it, we were just talking, I think you'd just been made CISO at Health Equity Partners, and you'd built an amazing program. So I think that's where we were. Where did you go after that? What was your next steps after that?
So my next one was the insurance company that I've just left. So
okay, so then you went through CISO there. How big was the team there?
At the insurance company?
Yeah.
I actually was I had all of technology as well, and it was a CSO there. So my team there was about 75.
Oh, wow. Okay. So big team. How did you find, had you worked in insurance before?
Not really, but I had been in finance, and then my husband had worked at this company and had recommended me. So when I was getting to a point where I was like, okay, it's ready, to move on. He's like, hey, have I got a job for you? Now, I thought it would go a little differently.
There we go. Yeah. Well, that's good. Did you find, because I often, when I sort of throw companies together, and I don't, you might be able to shed a bit more light on this, but whenever I think about, like, if we're as a company recruiting for, a bank or a finance company, I'll look at people from insurance. Seems quite bureaucratic companies tend to work in similar ways. Did you find that those kind of things, there's that kind of similarities tended to help, or does normally help?
Well, and HSAs are very similar. I mean, we work with a lot of insurance companies at Health Equity, so understanding the health insurance also, makes it a little bit easier. So.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, don't get me on health insurance. Moving from the UK, nationalized health insurance to here, and like having to figure out. My daughter needs a tonsillectomy. I think we were talking about that before we recorded. And we changed insurance at the beginning of the year, and now they are still in insurance, but they need a different referral, and they've had to put the operation back. And we're having to make all the phone calls, and this person's saying that we can't get an authorization. The insurance is saying they just need to call and we'd authorize everything. It's oh my goodness, I pull my hair out. But again, that's another podcast. I'm sure there's a podcast about people that are stressing about health insurance, right?
I could go on that one. I had a son who was hiking up in Idaho and fell off a cliff. And it was 40 feet down. On the way down, he actually, he went head first, but he grabbed a ledge and flipped over, but he landed on his feet, destroyed one foot. I mean, one ankle, all the bones in his leg, broke his wrist, both legs, but just destroyed one. So, he could, in his wheelchair, he could only go in circles because he only had but getting him surgery. I mean, he's had 3 surgeries now on the one foot. And just working through that with health insurance it was just so hard. Well, why do we need to have another surgery? Well, because it's just, I'm right with you. We could do a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. I'm sure I keep on hearing there's maybe concierge companies, but I feel like there must be, and I don't know whether that's something the super wealthy have or something, but I feel like there must be companies out there where I could literally, the amount of time I've wasted, the amount of time my wife wasted trying to sort this stuff out. If there's not a company out there, there you go. I've just created an idea for somebody who's going to go and make a fortune. But there must be companies out there that will just deal with it. You say, this is my insurance. These are the doctors I want to see, or I need them recommendation. Go and handle it all for me, because I would pay for that tomorrow.
Oh, me too. I mean, and it just the ease, because again, it takes so long to get through some of these things.
Yeah. Wow. And so your son, he's probably the only person I know that would be thankful for breaking his feet rather than landing on his head, right?
Right. I mean, to start with, we were concerned, that his spine was going to be compressed. That was the first thing the doctor said is, this is going to be, and luckily that didn't happen either. So he's got, and they do say that in the end, he'll probably have to have a replacement, an ankle replacement, or even have his, below his leg have an amputation and put on a prosthesis. It was that bad. But Right now he's had his ankle fused, so his foot doesn't move, but it's helped with the pain and because he has horrible arthritis there. There's
Yeah.
nothing that cushions any of the bones in there anymore. It just kind of eggshelled all of his bones, and he had these little sharp pieces of bones that ripped up his tendons and whatnot while he was in there. So it's been, but again, he survived with brain injuries and no back injuries. We're good.
Yeah, you'll take that, right? It's wow, what an
Absolutely.
amazing story. But let's not talk about it. Like we really could be in a different podcast quite easily
Yeah.
talking about this sort of stuff. I think good place. So to talk, like you've been a CISO, you talked about working for Larry when he was the CSO, and like, and you can include Larry in this as well. But when you look at like CISOs that you think are out there doing a great job, and absolutely name some, if you want to name two or three or whatever, anybody you can think of, you feel free to. And I had somebody who was like, I don't want to name them, I'm going to get in trouble for the ones I didn't name, so
That's
I
what
also get that.
I'm afraid
Yeah.
of.
um but like feel free to name them, but then also I would love to know what the attributes are that you, when you think about that person, something that they do really well that you aspire to, or is something that you want to achieve yourself that makes them such a good CISO.
So with Larry, and I can't mention him because we've already mentioned him, I can tell you he's very upfront and a matter of fact. So he doesn't hide anything. He doesn't, if when he very first started, and he'll probably not be happy about this, but he very first started, we had, everybody was going in and talking to him, and he was getting to know us, and there was a group of 5 of us, and he asked me to hold leadership meetings with this group of 5, and the one person who was in charge of privacy hadn't come in. And so he comes into the meeting, and he's like, I was just meeting with Larry, and I'm pretty sure he called me a name. And I was like, well, I don't. He's like, well, he said that I really reminded him of this person, and this person was really I'm going to say jerk, but it
Yeah.
was a different word. Really a jerk. And I was like, well, then yes, he did call. I mean, so he didn't hesitate to tell you how he felt about you. And
Yeah.
a lot of times that was difficult for me. I was used to always having a lot of people tell me, you do a great job, you're really good at this. And when I didn't do well, he told me flat out, hey, I'm concerned about this. There was one time where I was on the phone with somebody in a meeting, and somebody threw me under the bus, and I didn't step in and take it. And before I could hang up the phone or turn around, after the call was over, he called me and was like, "You do not allow that to happen. That's this is," and that kind of, it was frustrating for me because I just been thrown under the bus, and now my boss is getting it.
Yeah.
But you learn from that, and you learn that kind of resilience. And okay, what do I do to get better? One of the things that I think Larry is very good at is helping people to understand that you're going to take some kicks. That's just the way it goes. How do you learn and grow from those kicks? How do you respond from those kicks? That's how you prepare for a career. I really appreciate that about him. Now, he used to do a lot of things where he'd have me go do some of the work because he's like, you're softer. You can handle people better. You have more
Yeah, you're going to get a better reaction out of this person.
yeah. So go tell him this. And so I did a lot of that, but that's probably something that I do better than Larry is. I'm a much more relationship oriented leader than Larry is.
Yeah.
Now, combining those two things though really helped me, being able to be upfront. And one of the things that I don't put off now as much as a lot of leaders is difficult conversations, because in my mind, the faster we get those done and over with, the faster the other person knows what they need to do and can grow. And I expect my team to do the same for me. If I am really out there in left field and say, I expect them to pull me back. I tell all of my team, I expect you to lead up. I need to hear, I don't need yes men. I need to be told where I can improve and where I can do better, or else I'm going to stagnate. So I think that that's very important. Larry put together a team there at Health Equity where there are several people who could do those kind of things. Some of them had been, Arnold Bell, who had been in the FBI and then had become a CISO, and Larry recruited to come in. He was another one of those people who has the soft skills. Sometimes he would say things that you'd be, but he knew how to get things done. And that's hugely important. A lot of times, if you just have technicians who have moved in, and there's nothing wrong with technicians, we need them to be, moving forward. But if you don't know how to tell people how to get things done, you need to go do this. You need to be able to go talk to the people. You need to be across the board, not just in technology. If you don't have that, your technology and security teams are never going to get where they need to be. So those kind of things are very important. What I can tell you is I am a founding member and a founder and a board member of the Women in Cybersecurity Utah affiliate. And so I work with a lot of women who are leaders in cyber here in Utah. And I can tell you that a lot of them have come from different places. One of my, also on the board, Liz, she started off as in-house counsel and started working for a lot of cyber companies. And that's how she got into the CISO type of a role. Very, very different types. She started with privacy, but again, one of the things that, she has the ability to persuade. So as I like to say, in order to be a really good CISO, you have to be an influencer. You have to be able to influence those around you. And I have found that women seem to understand that concept better than a lot of men, because women have always had to influence in order to get to where they need to get. And so understanding that, I think, has makes a difference for women in cyber a little bit differently than men. So, I've talked to people. I don't know if you know who Masha Sadova is. She started a company called Elevate, which is the people element of cyber. How can you get...
Oh, yes, I'm connected with her on LinkedIn. I've never met her. We haven't spoken before, but I see her posts quite often come up, and I'm always sort of reading them.
Again, though, she's one of those people who, when she enters the room, everybody takes notes. She understands those kind of things. She's very personable. And again, she knows how to influence. And I think that is a huge thing that people like Larry, he's a very good influencer, but in a different way. But he also knows how to get people to influence for him, which I think is hugely, hugely important.
Yeah. I think like all of those people you spoke about and all of the different sort of attributes, the ability to communicate at all levels is so important. And then also, like a lot of the stuff you talked about are just parts of actually being yourself, like being your authentic self. You can't fake, like, sometimes, I might deal with something and I might think back and think, oh, I wish I'd dealt with that in a different way. But that's just part of my personality, right? We're human,
Right.
and we do things. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're right for that time, and sometimes they weren't right for that time.
Right.
And that's just how stuff is. And so yeah, I think the other thing is finding and hiring the right people is a skill in itself, right? Building the team to that are better than you at something, right? I know that Christina's really knowledgeable about this, and she's also good at dealing with people in this way, and I really struggle with that, so those kind of things.
I always tell my team, the ones who report up to me, if I could do your job, I wouldn't need you. So I need somebody, because I need somebody who can do what you do, because I can't. So that is how you build a team. If you have only people, if you can do all of your team's jobs, then you've hired the wrong people. You need people
Right.
who are doing different things. And I always try to hire mostly for attitude. I can teach tech skills. You can't teach attitude. You can't teach how they're going to fit in the team. You can't teach, really, to a certain extent, you really can't teach influencing either. I mean, you can if people are tend towards it, but you need people who are naturally going to be good communicators, or who have worked hard to become good communicators, who can talk about things that aren't just technology, that aren't just about security. I mean, if you need to understand budgeting. You need to understand what the business does and why it does it, so that you can secure it and you can work towards business goals. And you can add, rather than just be what everybody thinks. You're just a hole where people throw money. You want to be somebody, business enabler. And how do
Yeah.
you do that? You have to understand the business. So
Yes. Yeah, totally. That's one of the attributes we get the most. It's people understanding the business, because if you don't
yeah.
understand how they make money, if you can't then work with the different
Right.
stakeholders that all
Mm-hmm.
have their own drivers to make their sides manage. If you don't deal with them, and you can't, then you do become that office of the know that
Yeah.
security is sometimes called, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't get you a successful security program.
No, it makes people, even if your program looks successful on paper, people avoid you. They look for loopholes. They look for ways to get around what you're doing. And that's exactly the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's quite funny you started talking about what you hire for, and that is actually leads us quite nicely on to sort of the next area that we talk about. And that's about having been a hiring manager and hired a lot of people over
Mhm.
your time. There's a lot of, and you mentioned it, the market's changed a little bit for quite a few areas of security, not all, but many of them, in that with a lot of layoffs, there's a lot of people trying to get into the industry. Most of the jobs, even if it's quite a tough job to fill, we'll still get 300 applicants because of
Yeah.
all the people trying to get into the industry applying, despite having not having the skills or
Mhm.
experience. So, um, we rely personally a lot on our network, on our recommendations. That's how most of our roles get filled. We still advertise occasionally, but most of our jobs that won't even get advertised. Most of them are from that, and that's mainly because we know that we'd be sitting under 300 resumes, and that's what a lot of internal recruiters have to deal with. And it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why it's one of the reasons right at the moment why they struggle when sometimes there might be somebody good in that pile. How do you get to them? How do you filter them? And can you identify them? Have you got the
Oh,
experience to identify
hard.
them?
And sometimes people who you look at their resume and you think, not a chance. But when you talk to them, you know that they actually would be good in the role. And that's difficult too.
Yes, yeah, because when you've got 300 resumes, you're not going to speak to 300 people,
You can't.
and
And so
it's
it's all on
impossible.
the resume.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's absolutely perfect because it rolls us on to resumes.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you about like when you get a resume, when it gets to you, regardless of the role, what are the things you look for? Because most people only give it a few seconds before they decide how much time they're going to spend on the resume. When you get to it, when it's in front of you, you said about what you hire for, but what do you look for in that piece of paper that gives them that opportunity to speak to you?
So the first thing I look at is how long they've spent in different roles. If they are, if they are constantly moving roles in security, that's going to be really hard for me because there's going to be a lot of time I'm spending building you up, getting you to the point where you understand our what we do, how we do it, our processes. And if you're going to be gone within 6 months of me doing that, that's not going to be good for us. And
Yeah.
so I look for people who really are, 2 to 3 years in a role. I like that. Now, sometimes, there's reasons why people have moved. Um, the first thing I look for is, did you apply, or did somebody recommend you? Because again, like you were saying, if I have a recommendation, I'm going to look at that resume much more thoroughly than I'm going to look if somebody's just applied, because they have, somebody's told me this person is good. And that to me is huge. So particularly if it's somebody who I have worked with in the past has told me it's good and I trust them, then that person's going to get much more of a look over than somebody else. And if that person's resume isn't as good, but this person says, hey, I know that they haven't worked in this industry, however, let me tell you why they would be good, that's huge as well.
Yeah, that's getting an internal reference or recommendation. So important.
Yeah.
There are some companies, at least some companies used to make a commitment to interview every single internal recommendation they would get. Because part of that, I understand because obviously if you get somebody that recommends somebody and then they don't even get an interview, it
Yeah.
makes you look bad and then your employee's annoyed. And that's a good way to lose an employee rather than gain a new one.
Yes, absolutely. I
Um,
try actually to do that. If I get a recommendation, particularly an internal one, I try to, even if I know they're not going to, I'll say, hey, this is a role. I don't see how you're fitting in, but let me tell you what we're looking for so that as you move forward, you can start, moving in that direction yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And it is tough to speak to every single one, and so I understand that that's not always possible, but I do think starting off with the idea of at least I'm going to give this person much more
Yeah.
time than I would casually do if this resume sat on my desk and it was just passed to me as a pile of resumes. I'm already looking at it and thinking I don't think so, and then
Yeah.
there's going to be five out of this pile of resumes where I think they're good, and they're the ones that I'm going to look at, and I might not even ever get back to these,
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly how it is. And it's, my last few hires at my last company, I probably had about 600 resumes. And to tell you the truth, the first, I would go through and get rid of about 90% of them with just a quick glance, just like that. Nope, 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 because you just don't have time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you've got the recommendations. So those ones are going to be in this pile here, and you're going to have a bit more time to look over those. The ones that you're making those quick yes or nos, what are the big quick turn offs? What are the ones that you things that you
So
see and you're like, nope, that doesn't work.
quick, not staying in a job more than like 9 months. If your
Yeah.
last jobs have been less than a year, I just can't. If you have consecutively moved jobs into positions that seem interesting, you're not just saying, okay, I was doing this, but I moved from this to a job that it may not be progressing, but it's showing a diversity. I'm really looking for people who can learn new things, who can understand different types of role, because security is huge. There's
Yeah.
just not one role in security. You need to be able to understand different points. People who have on their resume things about public speaking, or are involved in some of the industry groups for security, which means that they really are into it, and that it's something that's not just their mom told them this is going to be a great role or career and
Right.
going forward, but that they're passionate about it. I look for those kind of things quickly. If they have, to a certain extent, if they have some certifications, that's important. But again, only in that it means that is something that they really want to do, that they're working forward to it. Those are the kind of things I'm looking for. And then I can tell you I usually have my team do some of the technical interviews first. And then my interview is all about, are you going to be a fit for the team? Are you going to be able to be an influencer? Are you going to be able to tell me no? That's very important for me, to be able to have somebody say, you know what you're doing is wrong here, or I disagree, or how do they do that? How do they come across when they need to lead up or across, or for the whole company?
Yes. Well, we'll come back into interviews in a minute. I want to step on that, but I want to talk about the stuff that you just mentioned on the resume, because I think there's a lot of really important points. So, I think for people that are listening to this, these are the things I would say, right? If you've worked at somewhere for less than a year, know that that can raise a red flag with many, many managers. It will do. And so I would encourage anybody that has had a shorter period of time, or a group of short period of time, to explain why. So if you were contracting for a period of time where you went from contract to contract, put this was a 3-month contract extended twice. All of a sudden, that isn't a 9-month short career job. What happened there? Instead, it's a good contract where you did a good job because you got extended.
Right.
So like, make sure that you put, there's always a little bit of background, and most people can fit like a line somewhere, or was laid off, there was a riff, was part of a riff, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an opportunity to set aside that red flag and do something about it before you get a chance to speak to somebody. So they are my tips on that. I'm trying to think some of the other stuff that you talked about, being involved in the community. I'm a huge proponent of that. You talked about being involved. Is it a YSIS chapter?
So
Or a witty?
we sis.
WeSys, yes. So I just this week, and by the time people see this, it won't be this week anymore. But I just found out that our RSA talk that I put forward has been accepted for this year.
Oh.
Yes, and it's myself, Larry Whiteside Jr., who's one of the founders of Cybersecurity,
Mm-hmm.
Mary Galloway is a good friend of mine. She's the CEO of Cyberjutsu, Women's Cybersecurity
Mm-hmm.
Society, and Lynn Dome. So the three of them are going to be on my panel, and we're going to be talking about the community involved, diversity within the community. Quite important topics at the moment with everything that's going on in the
Yeah.
world, especially here in the US. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to having those people in there. But the community is so important, and we're so tight knit that find your place in it, be
Yeah.
involved, volunteer. As the first thing I did when I started my business, I volunteered for the CSA. I ended up one of the founding directors of that chapter. I ended up twice president, and that's led me to so many great connections and contacts, and I've seen so many people that were on the board go and get jobs with people that they've met and stuff. It's so powerful, and it's such an important thing. It probably looks, I would say most of the people I speak to, is it looks better on your resume than
Oh,
your certifications and things like that.
absolutely. It shows that you're really, it is more of a passion than it is a hey. To me, I've taught cyber stuff, and I can pass a test and still know nothing about cyber stuff. But if I'm
Right.
in there doing stuff with CSA or even ISACA or any of these things, that means that I am actually doing, and that's huge.
Yes. And when it comes to the certifications, the bit that you stipulated when you were talking there, which I thought was really relevant, is that you said, I'm interested in their certifications because it shows a passion, it shows an area they're interested in. And one of the most common questions I get is, Chris, I want to take some certifications. Which ones should I take? And my answer 100% of the time is, what areas are you interested in? Because
Exactly.
the CISSP we'll see on job descriptions as a
Mhm.
nice to have. Very few put them in as essential anymore. But all of the other ones, they'll be on there, but they're never ever essential. And so what it really is an opportunity for you to show, I'm really interested in cloud, so I did my CCSK or my
Yes.
CCSP, and I'm really interested in um, I don't know, like my hacking, my certified
Ethical
ethical
hacker.
hacker, or an
Yep.
OSCP, or whatever you've done to show your interest. So yeah, 100%. I think that's how you pick your certifications,
Uh-huh.
not on what you see on jobs. It's what are you interested in.
And I think particularly the CISSP and just when I left, I was like, okay, what do I do for this period of time? Because I left at the end of the year, and so I took the CISSP and then I took the CISSM, just because I want to make sure I'm not losing and I'm in there. And so they're tough tests. I mean, but as long as you're learning, but they don't really tell you. I mean, they're good for leaders. What do you like in cyber? So there's all sorts of different things you can do in cyber. Look for those things. One of the things I'm looking for now is an understanding of AI, cyber and AI together. How do you
Yeah.
protect AI? How do you secure AI? How do you make sure that if you're coding it, you're coding it? That's an area that I'm really quite interested in now, and that's the area that I don't even know if there's certifications out there for that yet. But
Yeah,
boy,
I've not seen any yet. I would say watch this space. With the Cloud Security Alliance have just
yeah,
recently released a load of AI related and security related white papers and some other bits and pieces. They're working really hard on it. So I don't know. Maybe there's a certification coming out there. I'm sure plenty of the others are
yeah,
working on some as well. But it's a cutting edge area, and we're
it is.
starting to see a few more. They're calling them platform security roles, but where they're asking for a knowledge of AI and how large language models are built, and obviously
And
prompt
with data,
injection. And
data is gold now. So data and AI kind of go hand in hand. You need to be able to make sure you can understand both of those. So
yes, which actually brings us back to the communication part that we talked about earlier, because if you're a good communicator, you know how to use, and a good written communicator as
yeah,
well, you're going to get the most out of AI, right?
yes,
You're going to, and so
absolutely.
as we go forward in our careers, the requirement to really work hard on being a good communicator is actually even more important, despite us using tools for this communication, right?
Yeah. Well, people don't see it that way. And a lot of people in technology are very afraid of AI taking their jobs, and it is going to take some of the jobs, but there's going to be all sorts of jobs about working with AI that you need, so understanding that as well. Your job is going to be controlling AI instead of some of the other things, but there's always going to still be jobs there that we have to be preparing for.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking the what was it, the carriage drivers or whatever, when the horses, when
Yes.
the cars were coming, all thought that their careers were gonna end, and they were all doing something different, right? There's always more jobs created by any new technology that comes out. So I think we're very good at doing those sort of things as humans. We adapt and we
Yes.
find the next opportunity. And actually, funnily enough, I think a lot of the impact will be on some of the more grunt work, I call it grunt work type
I
roles,
agree. Yeah.
which might be where the entry level people come in right now. But if they don't need to come in and learn that, then they can go in and actually come in at a higher level doing things that are more interesting. As long as they
Exactly.
understand how that works, it might actually open up more opportunities and make your job a much more interesting one, rather than having to pay your dues in such a harsh way,
Right.
perhaps at the beginning.
The SOC analyst can come in and analyze in an entirely and actually do analysts rather than the grunt work. Looking at all of everything in your sim, and it will be better and it will be enjoyable, and you can do more intelligence work where you're pulling, you're getting intelligence in and you're looking at that. There's a lot that will be happening within the next 4 or 5 years, that will be really great, I think, for us in security. Now, there's going to, it's also really great for the bad guys out there.
Right?
They're
Yes, it
coming
is.
through, so we have to, keep up with them. But
Yeah,
uh,
any new tool is good for both sides. Got to just get
that's
your head
right.
around it as quick as you can. So I interrupted you when we started talking about interviewing. after that, and you were saying about what you look for. Let's just jump back on that because again, people work really hard to get themselves an opportunity to interview. Like, let's give them some advice on things that they can do so that they have a better chance of then not messing it up when they do get that opportunity.
One of my biggest red flags in an interview is not being able to tell a time that you messed up. If you cannot admit that you're not perfect, you're going to struggle working for me because I mess up. I assume that if you're pushing hard and you're really trying to do a good job, you're going to mess up. That happens. So if you can't tell me that you've messed up and this is how I took, responsibility for that mess up and this is how I fixed it, or, I wasn't able to fix it, this is how somebody helped, that kind of thing really is, if you can't tell me that, that's a red flag. If you can, and it is something, that, it's not like, I killed people or something like that. It really helps me to see that you can make a mistake and grow from it and move forward. That's huge for me. So being able to talk about yourself as if you're not perfect is very helpful for me.
And I'm sitting here laughing away because you don't know this, and the audience actually, by the time they hear this, might know this. But my very last episode I recorded, and I don't show, they might not release these in the same orders, but the very last episode I recorded earlier this week, we were talking about interviewing, and that was the exact same thing that they discussed as well. But that's great. This is important because it is like, that is such a common question to be asked about, what have been your biggest challenges? What things are you good at? What things are you not good at? Right. And your ability to be able to be honest, and like, first off, you can practice your answers. You can do these sort of things,
Yeah.
right? And you absolutely should practice, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. But finding the least, obviously you want to find something that really is a true thing that you need to, because the people come up with really terrible ones that aren't. You and me and you both know, once you've been around it long enough, that somebody's given you a fake answer that's an easy one for them to cover.
It's hard for me to let go of things at night.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I can't, my biggest challenge, my biggest problem is that I just want to be in the office all time working.
Yeah.
I hate to tear myself away from my desk. Yes, come on, let's work a bit harder than that, right?
Yeah,
We're human.
exactly.
Nobody's perfect at anything, including the person that's interviewing you, right? And so, even like, I'm laughing to myself as I'm thinking this, but like, you'll get your chance to ask the questions, ask the other person like a similar question. You might ask them, like, you asked me about my biggest challenge. I'd love to know you. What are the things that, as a manager, you're going to be my manager. What are the things you do really well? And what are the things that you don't do so well? That would, for me, I'd love to be asked that question.
Me too. That would be a green flag for me.
Yeah.
Them understanding how and I ask people that, how do you like to be led? What are your red flags on a leader? I almost always get I don't like to be micromanaged. Okay, that's great. But what does that mean? What can I do to support you? And I had one person, which is really sad, to tell me when I asked that question, he said, never make me work from home. And that was 6 months before before the pandemic. And I was like, I am so sorry that I have to make you work from home. But he knew that. He said, when I work from home, I've got a lot of kids at home and it's really hard for me. So if you really want to be a good supportive leader for me, never make me work from home. That told me he knew himself and he knew what his limitations were. We struggled a little bit. I tried to help him a lot when he had to work from home with some rules. I found him, we actually had the ability to kind of those WeWork places.
Yes.
Where you go a couple of days a week and work there so that he wasn't there. But the knowledge that yourself, that you have some self-awareness is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And actually the ability to, even in that instance with that question, the ability to, when you get asked that question, you can sort of tell them, you can tell them about the way you manage, like some of the things that you think you do really well and some of the things that you need to work on. And and then if I'm thinking about this person, first I'm thinking that was an amazing question. And secondly, I'm thinking they are coming in knowing what type of manager I am, right, as well. And they're coming in with their eyes open, knowing that, right, this is somebody that I can work for. Yes.
Exactly. And I try to be very, very upfront. If it's going to be a hard position, if the person who was there before was beloved and you're stepping into shoes that are going to be hard, or that they really created some burnt some bridges, and so it's going to be hard. I try to make sure people understand that coming in, so that they don't get in thinking it's all going to be roses and rainbows, and it turns out to be mud puddles
And clouds.
and
Yeah.
great. I want people to come in knowing, because I think that I'm setting them and myself up for failure if they don't know what it is coming in. Or if, like you said, if they don't know how I lead and it turns out that we're not compatible, it hurts both of us. It doesn't help either one of us. So
You end up with somebody working there that's not going to be there very long, right? And that's no good for you. You're back recruiting again, and that person's left the job. So and
probably
now
and
it's sort
not
of
in
stuck.
a great way, so they're not going to have happy things to say about the company or working there. So it's just going to be awkward.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great. Well, I'm glad we talked about that. I've got one final question because we're pretty
Okay.
much at the end of our second part. And I always end the interview on this. And so if you could go back to your early career self and you
Mm-hmm.
could give yourself one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Get a mentor as early as you can. Somebody who has, and with a woman, I would say that you can go either with a woman or with a man. Having a male mentor gives you traits that you don't, I mean, you see things and you're told things that you wouldn't normally be told sometimes with a woman, because they have different ways of doing business or of seeing the world. But also having so, maybe get two. To me, I've had several mentors, some coaches, and I would say that that's been, probably the biggest step up in my career, is having people, and then they become your helpmates. They help you find places to go. They talk to people for you, and so one of the first things I do coming into a company is find somebody else and saying, hey, I know you're in HR, or I know you're whatever, but you know this company. Can you kind of mentor me and help me get into the company, understand that? And that is hugely helpful, because if you ask somebody to help you, they become invested in your success. And so that's a double whammy to understand things, but then somebody else is working for you as well.
Yes. And it's funny because it's those sort of things people often don't do until they're a bit more confident in their
Yeah.
career and before they start asking for advice. The earlier you are, the I don't say less mature, less wise, but maybe it is that you're scared. I know I was anyway. You're
Yeah.
scared to show that you're vulnerable, right? You're
Don't know
scared to show that
everything.
you need help.
Yep. But people know that. So
Yes,
being able to
yes.
say, hey, I do, gives you that step up.
Yeah, we just not wise enough to know that everybody knows that
Exactly.
at any stage you don't know all the questions. That's why you've been a multiple time CISO and you're still you're taking your time now to do some studying to get some more
Yes,
certs. Not that at CISO level, that's probably not going to get you a job, right? It's not going to
it's
get you your
not.
next CISO job, but it's keeping fresh, keeping knowledgeable, and understanding that self-development and personal development is really important throughout your career. Um, and
100%.
a mentor can absolutely help you with that. And I think you mentioned sort of you were speaking to, I think, one of your mentees, I think you were
Mm-hmm.
saying earlier. And
Yep.
so people that realize how important mentors are and how they've helped them are often the same people that give up their time back,
Oh,
pay it
absolutely.
forward.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really try to do is I try to mentor men, because then men see women as successful leaders in a different way than they would normally. And I think that that's very helpful too, because women tend to have different leadership styles. And it's helpful for people to see these different leadership styles.
Yes, and that's one of the things actually I love about this podcast is that I get all sorts of people from all sorts of different backgrounds talking about their careers and becoming a CISO, and I've done a number of like in-person panels at ISC Squared, at RSA, InfoSec World, a bunch of these places. I've done these B-sides, Las Vegas, where I get sort of a couple of different CISOs from different backgrounds there talking live, because
Yeah.
often your only interaction with a CISO is the CISO that you've worked for. And
Yes.
we know that at CISO level, much like many execs, it's mostly not very diverse.
Right.
So to be able to see people from different backgrounds, from that have different colored skin, there are different genders that like, and enable them to see that there is diversity out there is something that I think this
Huge.
podcast allows you to see, and it allows you to hear the differences of what people think and understand why diversity is important and why actually I don't think it's necessarily the differences between us. It's some of the similarities that bring us together, and it's the differences that get us to think differently. So
diversity of thought is the most important thing, I think, in cyber. Is, I might see something one way and you see it an entirely different way, and that opens my eyes to this whole different way of thinking. That's huge. And if we're all if we all come up through tech and we all do the same steps to get there, we don't have that diversity of thought.
Absolutely. And the bad guys have an awful lot of diversity
right?
out there, right? They're coming from underprivileged backgrounds. They're coming from all sorts of different countries.
Yep.
They're under different pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. So, you need to be able to think a little bit more open-minded to compete with those people. Wow, that's a great thing, I think, to leave this on, and a perfect way to finish our conversation. So thank you for joining us, Kristina. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me. This has been really quite enjoyable.
Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. After we press stop, you can be like, I will never speaking to you again, Chris. That was so painful. I'm done. I'm going to ring Larry up and ask him, why did he tell me to do this? This is crazy. But thank you. Thank you so much. And thank the audience as well. Thank you, audience, for joining us. As I always say, if you've got any questions, you want me to ask anything specific, and you just have to reach out and let me know. In the meantime, do all of those things that everybody in a podcast asks, like, subscribe, comment, blah, 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 all of that nice stuff. And then at least it makes me feel like we've got a bunch of people watching it, and then I'll want to do more of these. And then I'll have more CISOs saying, I want to speak to you, Chris. And then so we all win. Good stuff. Thank you again, Kristina. Thank you, everybody. And see you next week for another episode of the Route to CISO podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Route to CISO podcast. If there's something you really want me to ask on the next episode, or if you're a CISO who wants to inspire the next generation, please reach out. I'll leave a URL to my LinkedIn profile, and make sure you connect and message me there. We're always looking for feedback, so please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.